Hey everybody! A while back I told you the story of the Muffin Dragon, which is a book I have here at the house, and so I thought I would share that one with you today. Beyond the horizon, farther than far in the middle of the Crystal Sea, is a beautiful island called Serendipity. Serendipity is an island filled with a variety of wonders, castles, and cottages, filled with peasants and kings. In a far corner of the poorest of poor on the island of Serendipity stood the poorest of poor castles. Everything was poor here, including the villagers who lived in the castle. They were happy here, but very poor. They didn't have much, but they didn't need much, for they took the greatest of pride in all they did. They took the greatest of pride in baking and selling of muffins. Not just any muffins, but the most delicious, delectable muffins in all the lands on the island of Serendipity. Every morning after the muffins were baked and still warm from the ovens, the villagers would load them onto their only wagon. Then they would hitch up their only horse, an old dappled mare by the name of Daisy, to the wagon and slowly creak across the drawbridge. The worn, dusty road led to villages that dotted the countryside like the spots on the old horse. It was in the villages that the muffins would be sold, and sold very quickly, for they were no ordinary muffins. These muffins were better than the best muffins. Now, the kindly folk that lived in the castle should have been richer than rich, but all the money they made selling the muffins had to be spent buying flour, sugar, milk, and eggs. The most expensive thing they had to buy was kindlewood, which was desperately needed to feed the gigantic ovens wherein they baked the muffins. Every day was the same. Early in the morning, long before the rooster woke to crow, the sun was up over the hill. The head baker, who was also the king, would feed the fires with all the kindlewood that had been bought the day before. As the ovens were heating up, he would tend to the other baking chores. He would carefully mix all the ingredients, the eggs, flour, and sugar, into the only mixing bowl, which was cracked. He would mix, whisk, and whip it all into a sugary, thick batter that he would ladle into the muffin tins. As he mixed more, his helper would slip the muffin tins into the oven to bake and bake until they were perfect in every way. Then, while they were still hot from the oven, the muffins would be loaded onto the wagon while Daisy was being hitched up, and the process would start all over again. Things were not good here, but at least they weren't bad. Not bad, that is, until one day there appeared at the castle a great and monstrous dragon. Now this was not your everyday run-of-the-mill dragon. This was an enormous, slightly overweight, muffin-munching dragon. With crumbs still on his face from the muffins he'd eaten at the last castle he visited, the dragon came waddling down the hill right up to the drawbridge. The castle folk, fearing that this might be a villager-munching dragon, ran inside and braced the crude plank castle gates. The Muffin Dragon took a deep, long, snurfy sniff. "Ah," he rumbled in a deep dragon-like purr, "I smell muffins." From the smell of things, this was a perfect place for a muffin-munching dragon to stay. He stuffed himself beneath the bridge and unpacked his pillow, his pajamas, and a picture of his pet pony he called Pearl. Then he brushed his large, crumb-crushing teeth, kissed the picture of the pony, laid his head down on the down-filled pillow, and fell fast asleep, dreaming of the treats to come. The next morning, the castle folk popped open the window shutters and, seeing nothing, assumed that the dragon was gone. Breathing a deep sigh of relief, the baker, who was also the king, began preparing for another day. Later, the baking done, the castle folk again loaded their only wagon overflowing with hot, steaming muffins. The wagon loaded, the gates creaked open, the hinges squealing loudly. As you would imagine, the noise of the squeaking, rusty hinges on the gate woke the soundly sleeping dragon. "Phoosh, sniffle," he muttered. "What's that?" He yawned once, stretched twice, and peeked over the side of the worn wooden bridge. There, clomping through the castle gates, was Daisy, pulling the wagon filled with sumptuous, mouth-watering muffins. He ripped off his pajamas, slicked back his scales, and leaped onto the bridge. With flames broiling out from his mouth and his nostrils puffing smoke, he roared, "Stop, or I shall burn up your drawbridge like so many dried sticks in a barbecue." The driver, who was just as frightened as could be, asked, "What do you want?" "Want?" the Muffin Dragon rumbled. "I don't want, I demand. Every time you cross my drawbridge, you shall pay me 10 muffins as your toll, your payment to get across my bridge." But, stuttered the driver, "this isn't your bridge. This drawbridge belongs to the baker, who is also the king." "Well," said the dragon slyly, burping a bit of smoke, "if I burn it up, it won't be anyone's drawbridge, will it?" After a short discussion with the baker, who is also the king, the driver agreed to give the dragon his toll of 10 muffins, for the baker had little enough money to buy firewood and supplies, let alone build a new drawbridge. From then on, every time the wagon crossed the drawbridge, both coming and going, the driver gave the dragon 10 fluffy, flavorful muffins. With crumbs falling like snowflakes in the winter, the dragon would sit beside the drawbridge, contentedly gorging himself on the scrumptious, mouth-watering, sugary muffins. This would have gone on to this very day, except for one major problem. The dragon was eating so many muffins that the driver did not have enough to sell in order to buy all the supplies that were needed to make more muffins. Every day the driver and Daisy would return with fewer and fewer supplies, and one day they returned with nothing at all. The wagon was empty, save for the 10 muffins needed to pay the dragon his toll. The next morning the head baker, who was also the king, woke as usual, but that was as usual as it got. There was no kindle wood to burn in the stoves to fire the ovens. There was no sugar, no flour, nor one single egg to crack in the bowl that could be whisked and whipped into batter. There was nothing to put in the muffin tins, nothing to bake. With a tear in his eye, the baker, who was also the king, sat on a pile of empty flour sacks and muttered, "I have no kindle wood for a fire. I have no supplies to bake any muffins. Without muffins, the dragon will burn down the drawbridge. What am I to do?" That same morning, the dragon woke, took off his pajamas, kissed the picture of his pony, brushed his teeth, slicked down his scales, and prepared for another day of muffin munching. He sat on the drawbridge and waited and waited and waited some more. No wagon came, therefore no muffins came, and the dragon's quite empty stomach began to rumble, grumble, and growl. For a time he ate the crumbs that had fallen from the day before, but the birds and the squirrels had taken all but the crummiest of crumbs. "No muffins," he muttered. "Where are my muffins?" Finally he thumped across the drawbridge and opened the massive gates that weren't even locked. The monstrous, muffin-munching dragon waddled up and down the halls, following smells of baking past. Finally he rumbled into the bakery itself. "Muffins!" he roared. "Where are my muffins? I've been waiting and waiting. It hasn't only been out of kindness that I haven't burnt down the drawbridge. Now just where are my muffins?" The head baker, who was also the king, walked up to the dragon and looked him right in the eye. "Mr. Dragon," he said, just as brave as he could be, "I am a very poor baker living in a poor land in a poor castle indeed. Before you came, the muffins I made barely allowed me to buy the kindlewood and supplies I needed just to make more muffins. Now that I have to give you so many muffins, I can't afford to buy kindlewood, and our ovens have no heat. Without heat, I cannot bake any muffins." The dragon was sad beyond belief. He could have just burnt the drawbridge down and moved on to another castle, but the muffins made here truly were the best of the best and better. Whatever were they to do? It was then that the muffin-munching dragon came up with the most marvelous and ingenious of plans. "I have it!" he roared. "I can have my muffins and eat them too, and even you, poor kindly baker, who is also the king, will have more than enough from the sale of your muffins to make more and more muffins." That very day the dragon packed his pillow, his pajamas, and the picture of his pet pony and moved to a new home. Where did he go? Where did he stay? How did he save the day? Well, from that day forward, the Muffin Dragon lived in the bakery, where he lolled about, billowing flame from his mouth, heating with ease the massive ovens. With the money he saved from not having to buy expensive kindlewood, the baker, who was also the king, could easily afford to leave a generous stack of mouth-watering muffins within easy reach of a dragon's great paw. While heating up the ovens with a lot of style and grace, the muffin-munching dragon smiles a smile with crumbs upon his face. Well, that's the end. Talk to you soon, everybody.